All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to Everything College World Podcast. Today, we carry on a preview and prediction for the Fiesta Bowl between Boise State and Penn State, winning by 28 points at home over SMU to advance to the quarterfinals. 10-point favorites are the Nittany Lions. 52.5 is the total. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, live from Glendale, Arizona on New Year's Eve. Getting things started with the Penn State offense. This is a group that was, all right against SMU. The passing attack was kind of weak. The rushing attack, they almost ended up with 200 yards running the football. But they didn't have to do too much, Nick. There wasn't much urgency from this offense. They're playing a really good defense. And on the other hand, their defense had 2 pick sixes to start the game. So your offense doesn't have to do too much when your defense is able to put up points like that. You're also not on the field as much either. Penn State, though, this is a group that still, puts up over 200 passing yards per game. Drew Aller this year has been a really good quarterback. Hold on. You hear that shit? Aller's been a really good quarterback this year for the most part. He's got 21 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions coming into that game. Only had 127 yards against SMU. Obviously the conditions are going to be much better. They just played in the dome against Oregon, and they had great balance, and Aller had a pretty good game, 226 yards, 3 touchdowns. They have 2 picks in that one. But they weren't able to really accomplish much, and I think that will be a different story here against a pretty weak secondary. Tyler Warren, of course, over 1,100 yards on the year, 6 touchdowns, 90-plus receptions. Harrison Wallace has emerged as a nice number 1 pass catcher. Amari Evans has been a big play weapon at times this year. Singleton's lethal out of the backfield, and that's pretty much it. It's going to be those 3 or 4 guys catching the balls, but Warren, I think this is a great opportunity for him to feast, Nick, because I don't think Boise State's really going to have the personnel to be able to cover this guy. What do you anticipate on them going back to an indoor stadium now, putting those 20-degree, snowy conditions behind them where they didn't have a great day? Aller and Penn State should be in line for a much better showing through the air.
Quite frankly, I never really expected Penn State to dominate through the air against SMU, and you didn't really think they were going to have to with the dominant running back duo that they have. The defense certainly bailed out the Lions in this game, forcing 3 interceptions on Kevin Jennings. I believe 2 of those were returned for touchdowns, so that certainly helps out when your defense is, putting some points on the board for you. 2 pick sixes will really go a long way for your team. I think Drew Aller is having a good season, really shown that he's a solid starter. I think he's going to continue to blossom into a really good quarterback for Penn State. Having a good season, obviously about 70% comp rate, over 2,900 yards passing, 21 plus touchdowns, and then 7 picks from the season. He's looked really good, hitting his tight end Tyler Warren a lot. 1,100 yards receiving for him, 6 touchdowns. He's been phenomenal, about 80 yards per game for Warren. He's incredible, best tight end in the nation, getting a lot of targets. He has 88 plus receptions, which is a lot more than the next highest receiver in the team. Harrison Wallace is only around 40 receptions, so they clearly throw the ball to Warren a lot. He's going to be your big target guy in this offense. Wallace has been really good, about 650 for him and 4 scores. Amari Evans has been good, as well as Singleton out of the backfield, who's got 5 receiving touchdowns. A bit of a dual threat back there that's been really solid for this offense. I think they were really good when they played in Indianapolis. I think they'll be just as good playing in the Fiesta Bowl in a temperate climate in a dome like that, a great stadium they have down there in the Phoenix metro area. I think it's not an issue at all for this team. I like what they've been able to do here through the air. I trust this passing attack that's been pretty good so far this season. I think they've held their own. Nothing, too phenomenal, but they've been good. 246 yards, 250 yards per game through the air, about 2 passing touchdowns per game as well. Pretty good numbers by my standard.
And, of course, they don't have to be elite. This is a team that's really predicated on the run game. Tyler Warren, of course, he brings a lot to the table in terms of his versatility, brings a lot of eye candy as a Swiss Army knife. It's going to be tough for the opposing defense to defend. Looking at this run game, putting up 200 yards per contest, they've been impressive. The interior offensive line has been a big reason for that. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, they're both coming off pretty stellar performances against SMU. They're both looking at 900-plus yards on the season, approaching 20 combined touchdowns as well. So this has been a phenomenal duo. They split touches right down the middle. They're surprisingly good against Oregon, Nick. This is a team that had almost 300 yards rushing in less than 40 attempts against the Ducks. I didn't think they'd be even close to that good, and they just faced another great defensive line. Some tough sledding early by the end of the day. Both running backs had exactly 6.4 yards per carry. And you focus on that interior O-line, right guard Sal Wormley, him and left guard Ola Iona are the veterans in this group, and they've been phenomenal this year. And then Nick Dawkins, he's been a bit of a liability, especially in pass protection. Hasn't been all that bad, though, as a run blocker. What do you make of this rushing attack, Nick? Because for the most part, they've been good this year, and in tough matchups, it's kind of been a knock on Penn State that they can't run the ball all that well. They did very good against the nice Illinois defense earlier in the year. Ohio State was certainly a bit of a bumpy road. But as of late, they just played 2 great defensive lines. They're both top 10 in FBS, and they didn't really have that much of an issue with them.
No worries against SMU for this rushing attack. Singleton, 90 yards rushing, 6.4 yards per carry, and 1 score, while Allen had 70 yards rushing, 6.4, and 2 scores for him. A really lethal 1-2 punch running the ball here. Each of these guys, Singleton and Allen, have over 900 yards rushing this season. Singleton's a bit more effective at 6.4 yards per carry on less attempts with 7 touchdowns, while Allen has about 4.8 yards per carry and 6 scores prior to today's game, where you can add the scores from the matchup earlier today, where Allen now is up to 8, while Singleton is up to 8 as well. These are very effective backs. They basically mirror each other, other than the fact that Allen has about 40 to 50 more touches than Singleton does. They average about 65 yards per game. Each of them really good numbers there. Drew Allers really solid on the ground as well, about 280 for him and 6 scores. While Tyler Warren can be involved, and he has 4 rushing touchdowns, so he can be involved as a bit of a gadget player, trick play thing. The offensive line's held up pretty well. I do share some of your concerns with the offensive line, certainly at center with Nick Dawkins. I do worry about that. Drew Shelton's been good at left tackle, and Sal Wormley has been good at right guard. I think this is a good offensive line. This is a good rushing attack that continues to find ways to print yards on the ground, and it's really boding well for them.
I'd say that might be the biggest concerns. Left tackle Drew Shelton in pass protection. Right tackle, since they moved over to Nolan Rucci, he's been great over the last couple of games since being a full-time starter. So maybe not as much of a concern there. But this is a great pass rush they're facing. Penn State, though, this has been a pretty good offense. Sometimes you kind of feel lifeless because they don't always execute, especially early on in the games with their passing attack. But by the end of the contest, they usually find a nice balance. Moving to the Boise State offense, and of course, how can you not start with Ashton Gianti, runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. 2,497 yards, 29 touchdowns. He's I think it was 132 yards, away from breaking Barry Sanders' record. He'll need a lot of touchdowns to break that mark as well, but no one has really came this close since Melvin Gordon a couple of years, like a decade ago at this point. This guy's phenomenal, though, Nick. No one's really left him in the mud. This is a guy who typically has 30-plus touches per game, still averages over 7 yards per attempt. So the effectiveness is up there. The efficiency is great, facing loaded boxes tremendously. In the Mountain West, of course, I don't think Penn State's going to look to load up the box all that much, Nick. I think they're going to put a lot of trust in their front four, at least early on into the game, until he starts carving them up. But if he starts carving them up, boy, Boise State, you got him.
This is a guy that's been phenomenal, right? You don't have to say that. You already know who Ashton Gianti is. There's no need to really intro him. He's been really incredible this season, about 2,500 yards rushing, 7.3 yards per attempt, 29 touchdowns, 192 yards per game. All those stats are incredible. He's a phenomenal player. I cannot wait to watch him. I think he's the biggest key to success here. He has faced some really difficult defenses because they load the box. They put a ton of guys there. They put 9 when they can. They put as many players as they can loading the box, and that really is an issue for him. Occasionally, we've seen him have some slower games, but still, that clip at 192 yards per game is phenomenal. I expect him to have a good day against Penn State here. Yes, it's a great defensive line, but I see no reasons why he can't have a good day. He had a good day against Oregon, who's a really strong defensive line as well. Had a better day against UNLV the second time around as well. This is a guy that's playing in this matchup. He's going to want the national spotlight. He is a great player, phenomenal player on the ground. He's just so dominant. He can really do a lot to you. We haven't seen a back like this in a very long time. Like I said, probably Melvin Gordon, one of those backs at Wisconsin would probably be a comparable player in recent memory, at least. Maybe Derrick Henry, if you want to throw that name as a comparable player. He is so good, Ashton Gianti. I cannot wait to watch him on the national stage. I can't wait for a lot of America to watch him as well. There's probably a lot of casuals that have not seen him play a whole lot because he plays in the Mountain West, plays late night on the East Coast. This is an opportunity for him to play in prime time, really put up some good numbers, and put up a strong showing in a very meaningful game.
192 and 3 scores to be exact against Oregon back in week 2. And one thing we've talked about that gets overlooked with this Boise offense is his abilities as a runner. Sucks all those people into the box, has allowed this passing attack to really thrive. They also bring adequate balance to the table, 200 plus yards per game for Maddox Madsen, 22 touchdowns, 3 picks on the year. And what it does is it allows for play action. It also allows for them to sneak guys into the flat, down the seam, toward the boundary. This is a passing attack that has been pretty respectable in its own right. They have a nice tight end, Matt Lauder, who's a phenomenal player, 523 and 6 touchdowns this year. They also have a leading receiver from Indiana, Cam Camper, 55 grabs for 837, another 4 scores, and Latrell Caples is their third leading pass catcher. Again, Nick, this offense played Oregon back in week 2. The passing attack was still kind of getting into a groove with this young quarterback, but by now they've really figured things out. If they can run it against this opponent, I'm sure they're going to be able to have success through the air. They're not going to threaten you with NFL talent or anything like that. But the scheme with Dirk Cutter as the offensive coordinator and what they're able to do is vastly undervalued.
It is vastly undervalued. This is a offense that has about 200 yards per game, rushing and passing. You don't see a lot of offenses in the nation that have that type of balance. 200 plus in both categories is very impressive. Madsen, he beat out Malachi Nelson, a highly favored recruit who transferred from USC to get the starting job, and Madsen has played really good football since getting that starting job. 60% comp rate, 2,700 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 3 picks. Really responsible, protects the ball, really good through the air. Also underrated thing about Madsen, he's pretty decent on the ground. 224 and 5 touchdowns in the red zone. They can use his legs if they need to. He's a solid red zone quarterback when it comes to rushing the ball, so certainly something you want to keep your eye on. Obviously, Janty's going to get a lot of touches in the red zone, but I think, you could give a touch or two to Madsen in a situation, throw Penn State off a little bit. I think that's something you have to keep an eye out for.
Of course, the offensive line has been tremendous. It's going to be up to them to clear the way for Gianti. Left guard Cage Casey, or left tackle that is, he's been phenomenal, especially in pass protection. Left guard Ben Dooley's been very good. Zach Holmes at center. Right guard Taylor Keenath isn't as great. And the right tackle Hale Schmidt, he's also a bit of a liability in pass protection. For the most part, though, Nick, this is an offensive line that's passed every challenge they've had. And, facing these stacked boxes, these guys, they're used to physicality by now. So I don't think Penn State's going to be able to overwhelm them by any means. But it's certainly possible, especially with Abdul Carter coming off the edge, they get ramsacked in this game. And that's kind of what the line indicates, and that's what everyone thinks is going to happen, Nick. Make the case for why it won't.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I think this is an offensive line that's super strong and has an opportunity to stand up here. I think this is the biggest key for me is, can this offensive line hold their own? I think they can. I think Cage Casey and Ben Dooley on that left side are going to be really strong for this offensive line. I think Roger Carrion in the right guard position as well is going to be really big and physical for this unit. They had a good game against Oregon earlier in the season, obviously, with Janty getting to that 192 mark and 3 touchdowns. I think they're able to be solid in the situation. Yes, Abdul Carter is probably the best player they've faced coming off the edge, I think, so far this season. But still, I think this is an offensive line that's a veteran group. They're a group that's really played clean football this year, avoided penalties, smart football. They're an in-sync unit with a lot of veterans that have been playing the game for a while now. When you look at, Dooley is a graduate senior. They have Mason Rudolph, who is a redshirt junior, a guy that's been around the program. So this is a unit that I trust, and they're going to have a good day here, pave the way for their star running back to make some noise on the national stage.
Now you move to a Penn State defense coming off that stellar effort against SMU. Of course, you allude to Abdul Carter, 11 sacks, Big 12 player of the year, phenomenal player off the edge. You could have had at least 3 or 4 more sacks. He was just eating them up on that left side. Of course, he's facing a pretty bad tackle for SMU compared to an all-conference caliber player here in Casey. It's not going to be just him, though. Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant in the interior, Vanover, Keziah Izzard. This is an incredibly deep defensive line. They've had their issues at times stopping the run against Oregon. It wasn't pretty. Ohio State on the boundary was able to generate some good runs. USC had a big play that really boosted their numbers up to almost 200 yards in that one. But they're competitive nonetheless, Nick, against these tougher rushing attacks. I don't exactly see them getting blitzed for 200 yards on the ground. But again, it is certainly possible, and I think Penn State, they've kind of underwhelmed at times this year up front, but Carter really is the ultimate difference maker. Devon J. Thomas, another one that gets involved, Smith Vilbert. This is an incredibly deep defensive line, a lot of size, a lot of heat coming to the table. I don't think they're exactly going to take over this game completely, but against SMU, there was no breathing room between the tackles. Nick Burchard-Smith couldn't generate anything. That can't be the case here. I don't think it will be for Janty. He's going to make some plays, but that was a big key in that SMU game.
That certainly was a big key. I think this is an opportunity for Penn State's defensive line. I do like the matchup for the Boise State offensive line, that is, but this is certainly a dangerous matchup. And if you're a Boise State fan, you got to be a little nervous here. Abdul Carter is just an incredible player for this team, an All-American for a reason. 60 total tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 10 sacks for him, 3 pass breakups, just a do-it-all player. So good coming off that edge. Danny Sutton's been really solid as well. 26 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks for him. Really good numbers there. He's a very productive player. I think there's some other decent pieces on this defensive line. Zane Durant's been really good for this team, 35 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Keziah Izzard's been good as well with 4 tackles for loss and 1 sack. All these numbers are, of course, prior to the game against SMU. I think, Izzard had a good game against SMU as well. He had 5 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. You've seen good numbers out of him. Danny Sutton had 1.5 sacks in that game as well. Carter had 2 tackles for loss and a sack in that matchup. So really good numbers from their big players performing against SMU. Can they perform well against Boise State? I think it's certainly possible. Certainly a matchup you want to keep your eye on.
You look at this linebacking group, the one that we've praised as really coming a far way, played the best game you'll probably ever see from the middle of a defense. Kobe King led the way with 6 tackles. His 2 counterparts, Dom DeLuca had 2 picks, 1 for 6, and then Tony Rojas, who's been elite in coverage this year, also housed 1 nick. I haven't seen a game like that from a linebacking group in a long time. Of course, they're playing a quarterback that did give them some opportunities, but you got to be in the right position to counter on those opportunities, or to capitalize on them, that is. And that's what they've done. Kobe King this year has been a great run defender. Rojas on the other side hasn't been as much. He's been a very poor tackler. He's really struggled against the run, so that's a guy they're going to try to get in favorable situations for them. And DeLuca, of course, he's been a playmaker for them in coverage this year. He's also a bit of a poor tackler, so even though they're coming off a phenomenal game, Nick, against a team that also likes to run the ball with great efficiency, this is going to be a totally different ball game against a physical running back that can make people miss and can, drag you a long way in terms of yards after contact. What do you think of what they just accomplished and what they're going to be able to do here against Boise?
This is a great linebacking unit that had a great day and a phenomenal performance. You saw what they could do. This linebacking unit, they had a phenomenal day, which I think is a really key moment. King leading the way of 8 total tackles. That's a really impressive number for him. And then obviously the picks from the other two pieces, DeLuca, as well as his partner and Tony Rojas, were really important interceptions for this team. King's been really good prior to today, 72 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Rojas 46, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Probably your weakest link here. You're going to want to try and target him. I think it's certainly an opportunity. They're going to try and put themselves in good position, like you were saying earlier. And then Dominic DeLuca has been solid as well, 28 total tackles for him, 3 tackles for loss, a good asset. This is a very good linebacker unit that just played probably their best game of their season, maybe the best game of their collective careers as a unit. I really like what they've been able to do. The matchup is, a little bit tougher potentially against Boise State than it was against SMU, but it's certainly something you want to keep an eye on. A very talented unit here.
You look at a Penn State defense, or a secondary that is, I don't think they're going to be all that tested. Jalen Kimber hasn't been that great in coverage this year. AJ Harris, on the other hand, has been great. Zion Tracy, when he got in the field, is a pretty good tackler against SMU. In the slot, Cam Miller, he's going to play a good bit. He's been a really respectable player, especially against the run. They also have safeties who are very good at getting to the box and making plays. Zakee Wheatley, Jalen Reed. I mean, this is as good as you're going to find when it comes to a safety duo that can stop the run. You've seen that again against the Mustangs as well, Nick. These guys are really good when it comes to their run fits, and they're going to be close to the line of scrimmage a lot. It's Boise's job to make them miss, but these guys, they don't do that a lot.
They don't miss a whole lot. Wheatley had a really good game against SMU as well. 7 total tackles for him in that matchup. Solid numbers there. Impressive performance for him. 70 total tackles in the season for him. 3 pass breakups, 2 tackles for loss. Good numbers there. Jalen Reed, 79 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss for him. 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. He's been really good at safety. AJ Harris has been really good for this team. 39 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, 4 tackles for loss. Zion Tracy, Kimber, Miller, and Elliott Washington have all been solid at times for this team. Washington's been good in coverage, as Kimber and Miller have. Good unit overall. I like what the secondary can do. They probably won't be tested a whole lot, but they're going to have to be good against the run, because obviously Janty is that sort of X factor. Can they be good against the run? I think it's certainly possible, but it's something I want to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, not getting bit, not biting hard on that play action down the seam or towards the sideline as well is going to be something that's important. Something that won't lose you the game, but it'll certainly keep these drives going for Boise. They want to establish long ones. Moving to the Boise State defense, this is a run-stopping unit that's been really good this year. Less than 1,500 yards total. That equates to about 115 yards per game. UNLV is the only team this year to eclipse 200, and that was off of like a 90-yard run where they still didn't even score on that drive. Crazy thing to believe, right, Nick? They got stopped close to the goal line, didn't end up scoring at all. So this defense made one mistake, and they made up for it just a couple plays later. Held Oregon to 109 yards rushing back in week 2. It's been a physical group. There's nothing that makes me believe that they're just going to get annihilated in this game. It will be a tough ask, though. Hamid Hazain has been a phenomenal edge rusher for them. Great pass rusher, good against the run. Herbert Gums as well. Jaden Virgin Morgan. Those are going to be the big 3 for you. Braxton Feely, hasn't been as great as a tackler in the hole. Michael Callahan, Sheldon Newton, and Max Steed. Other guys will get on the field. But for the most part, those first 3 guys I read, Nick, those are going to be the productive ones. Virgin Morgan, 15.5 TFL, 12.5 for Hamid Hazain. He also has the team high in sack. Well, he's second most with 8.5. I mean, they have a nice edge rushing duo here that can certainly make this a ball game.
They can certainly make this a ball game. I'm counting on them to have a good game here. 42 total tackles for Hassan, 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. Good numbers there. Jaden Virgin Moore has been solid as well. 39 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 10 sacks for him. Great numbers there. Braxton Faley has been good as well. 22 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Herbert Gums, 20 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. While Newton has 18 total tackles, 2 sacks for him. Max Steege has 11 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. While Callahan's been not bad either with 17 total tackles and a sack. Productive unit, physical unit. They're going against a great offensive line here, but I like to think that they can win this battle. This is a very strong unit on paper that they can have a good day here.
Yeah, they had 4 sacks against Oregon. They have the second most sacks in FBS, so people can sit here and say they annihilated the Mountain West. Well, they played the number 1 team in the country, and they did their average, so I don't want to hear anything. But no, the defense not as great. Marco Nataraini, He's also been a really good run defender, but not the most efficient tackle or consistent player in coverage. Andrew Simpson, he's a veteran. I like his abilities. Saya Oladapo and then Alexander Tobner, they're going to be playing in the box as well as safeties. I mean, this isn't a team that has a whole lot of guys that play linebacker. It's really just the top two starters. And then, of course, safeties will join them in the box. What do you think of this linebacking group, Nick? Because I think for the most part they've been good, but I think in a matchup like this, it might certainly not be as favorable to them, especially if they have to draw matchups with Tyler Warren.
I think Nazarene is a really solid player, but obviously the matchups with Tyler Warren could certainly be a headache. 55 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Simpson's been really good as well. 42 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and a pick for him. While Odelipe has been involved in the box as a linebacking player, slot, they move him around a little bit as a safety. 63 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups for him. Good numbers overall. I like what this linebacking core can do. I think it's a solid, reliable unit.
Now you look at a secondary that's just not been that great. These are veteran corners. Marion McCoy's had a great year in coverage. Everywhere else, he's not that great. Jeremiah Irby from Cal, he's the number 2 corner. He's been good. Devon Banks, he's been all right. They have a great player. And Ty Benefield has been a nice producer for them in the back end. He's a pretty good run stopper as well. Respectable asset in coverage. Rodney Robinson, like what he's been able to provide in coverage as well. Very limited yak that he's given up this season. Benefield will play a lot of safety as well. Their top safety, Zion Washington, is a bit of a liability for what is the 110th ranked pass defense, Nick. I mean, this is a big problem for them. This isn't a great group. They're getting torched against San Jose State. They ended up pulling away late, but they were still having a lot of success in that game. Early on in the season, I know some teams were putting up numbers playing from behind, and then Oregon had an 86% comp rate in that one. Is there any red flags for you in the secondary? I think these numbers might be inflated a little bit because I certainly think they're prone to allowing big plays, and I think against increased talent here, it's not going to be pretty, especially, again, I keep alluding to Warren in the slot. It's really just going to be a mismatch. This is a day one NFL starter going up against a Mountain West caliber secondary, and it just screams bad matchup all day.
It is a bad matchup, and I think if Boise State's going to win this game, they have to overcome this matchup and really play solid football on offense, flawless football on offense, if you would, because you're going to have to overcome the matchup, the fact that Penn State's going to want to score points quickly with the way that they can attack you through the air. I think McCoy is probably the best coverage asset on this team, a guy that's really solid. 58 total tackles for him, 2 tackles for loss, a pick, and 14 pass breakups. Really good numbers there. I want to see what he can do, while Irby as well has been solid. 31 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and 7 pass breakups for him. Devon Banks has been a little bit weaker in coverage. 33 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups for him. Ty Benefield, probably the best tackler on the team, with 73 total tackles, really good against the run. 5 tackles for loss for him, 3 pass breakups, 2 picks. Zion Washington's been disappointing for me this year. 63 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss for him. While you look at Rodney Robinson as well as a safety, has been disappointing at times. 47 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 3 pass breakups. This unit's got to be good, right? There's no sugarcoating it. The secondary has to have a good day here. They got to be playing good football. Can't be making mistakes. Can't be giving up pass interferences, holding, things like that. Have to play flawless football. Got to play smart, because this is a very shaky unit that certainly worries me.
Now we look at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons. Penn State gets every single edge other than running back, but that's an obvious edge for the Broncos. Any issues with this one, Nick? You think the offensive line might give Penn State a run for their money? You think it's pretty clear cut?
Yeah, as I say, offensive line is the only one that I'd flip right now. I think that gives you a run for your money. I would suggest the offensive line would flip, but outside of that, I'm not going to fight you on quarterback, wide receiver, and the defensive side of the ball. Just makes too much sense for me with the way things are going. That Penn State, they're just a better team on paper, a really talented line roster that James Franklin has.
That leads us to the final thoughts on the prediction. I think this will be a good game. Double-figure spread. It's been bet down since it opened at 11. For Penn State, control the game with your front four. If you can do that, you're going to have a great day. You're not going to get burned through the air at all if you can slow down the run with your front four. Again, I don't think Penn State early on is going to load boxes, so that's going to be an opportunity for Boise to really show up. But you're going to see these safeties all of a sudden, I think, late in the play clock. They're going to creep towards the line of scrimmage. And it's going to be hard for Gianti in this rushing attack to get going. But I think feeding Tyler Warren, it's going to be the biggest key. He's going to have double-figure receptions more than likely. For Boise, the pass game will have to be efficient. It's not just going to be on the ground game. If they can be efficient, that's going to open up the door for this great balance. And that pass rush needs to stay hot. They've been good all year long, even against the number 1 team in the country. I think this will be a competitive game. Right now, I have a bit of a lopsided score. I think as we get closer, they'll all probably draw this one much closer. 34-17 Penn State. I just think the Aller is going to have a big day through the air. And I think Boise will be competitive in the trenches for the most part. But I think Aller, he's just going to pick them apart, quite frankly. I think Gianti, as good as he's going to be, it's going to be hard for them to manufacture consistent drives running the ball. But quite frankly, the way you can eat up time of possession, you only need a couple of them. And I think that might be a difference maker for Boise State. Again, I just think Aller and his passing attack will score too many times too quickly. That'll be the biggest difference as they get the job done and advance to the semis.
I'm going to roll the dice here. I'm going to take Boise State. I like the story a lot with this team out of the Mountain West. I think this team is really solid. Obviously, the best player in the nation, in my opinion, Ashton Jeanty. I look at the common opponent for these two schools. They both played Oregon, obviously. A bit different because Boise State played them in September and then Penn State played them in December, but Penn State lost 45-37. Boise State lost 34-30. I thought Boise State looked a little bit better in the game on defense against Oregon than Penn State did on defense, and I think the 2 picks from Drew Allaire were obviously a big swing in that game as well. Common opponent, though, interesting when you look at it like that, in my opinion. And this is a Boise State team that's playing good football. I thought they looked good against UNLV, albeit a little bit slow at times, but the weather was a bit of an impact in that game as well. It wasn't the sweetest weather up there in Idaho for that matchup. I like this Boise State team. I think this team is playing with good football here. As long as they control the tempo, control the clock, and don't get beat over the air too much, play a solid game in the secondary, and really let Jeanty have a good day. I think Jeanty will have a great day. I think he'll be able to run, get at least 150 yards on the ground, potentially more, and produce like we've seen him produce throughout the season because he's just so talented of a back. This is a big coming out party for him, a big stage, a big opportunity to put on a great showing in front of the national audience. Boise State also won the Fiesta Bowl back, in 2008. That was a really fun story, so certainly keeping an eye on that. This is a big moment for them. The fan base will certainly travel well, a great opportunity in a major bowl game in the college football playoff. I like Boise State here. I feel like at some point upset's going to have to happen. At the time of recording this, there's been no upsets, been chalk so far. I'm going to roll the dice a little bit. I'm going to take Boise State. I feel good about this team. I like the vibes here. This is really a fun matchup. I think it's going to be a shootout similar to the 2 games that both respective teams played against Oregon, which is sort of what I'm basing this on. I like a shootout here. I think Boise State gets away with one and wins this one. I'm super excited for this matchup. I think this is one of the more exciting matchups we've had in recent college football playoff memory on paper. 2 teams with a lot of interesting storylines. Can't wait to see this one go down on New Year's Eve. The only game on New Year's Eve as well, so you get to watch it in prime time before the ball drops. A really cool, fun matchup.
Yeah, like everything you said there, also an opportunity for Jeanty to break that single season record, so I hope he can accomplish that. Should be a good game all around. That'll be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.